You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
Right up Meridian, baby.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Right Up Meridian podcast. Scott here with you. As you well know, Right Up Meridian podcast is part of the back. Couldn't start off without messing up within the first 12 seconds. The Right Up Meridian podcast is part of the Back Home Network, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. Check them out. They have a new IU collection dropping, and then we will all be at if you're listening to this before Saturday, February 3rd, the whole gang is going to be for the watch party this weekend, IU versus Penn State. Tony and I will be at the post-game show at the Upstairs Pub afterwards. So in the midst of hopefully an IU win, if you want to talk some Pacers, come grab Tony and I, and we can bend your ear all day. But Tony, man, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. Yeah, looking forward to this weekend. It should be a lot of fun to get all of the folks of the Back Home Network together. You know, Crimson Cast, Assembly Call, obviously with me, IU Film Room, X's and Joe's guys will be there. You know, we've got Mike coming all the way from Philly. You know, we're far and wide here at the Back Home Network, so it's exciting stuff. It's
like Voltron, man. We're bringing all the pieces together. We're going to be a monster in Upstairs.
We're ready to go.
So let's talk Pacers. Not a ton to dive into because it feels like we're still like a week away from. We are like a week away from free agency kind of hitting. It's the end of the free agent deadline. But the good news is you did have Hailburton.
Deadline.
You what?
Trade deadline.
Yes. Sorry, that's what I meant. Sorry. Yes, the trade. I was thinking that in my head. Yeah, the trade deadline. Which, by the way,
I mean, free agency is cool with me too. Like, let's just go. let's just go take some.
Just start signing guys right now. Like Paul George, we got you. Hailburton came back again, I guess, for a game against the Celtics where he was on a minutes restriction, which I don't remember them saying that beforehand. Then it kind of sucked watching the game. You're like, all right, like in the third quarter, like, all right, we'll get this Hailburton lineup back in and we can make a push at it. And then all of a sudden it's like, we're not getting the Hailburton lineup back in. He's on a minutes restriction, which, by the way, makes sense. Like, totally fine with it. The second unit or second/first unit played really well against the Celtics. You know, Aaron Nesmith had a lot to say for his old team. They played really well. It just came down to at the end. I mean, the Celtics are a really good team. But, you know, Tony, what are your thoughts on that game or just Hailburton's return or where we're at right now with the Pacers?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, that we talked about this on the last pod with, you know, the Hailburton and the, you know, the NBA All-Pro stuff and him being able to, you know, get that I think it equates to like $45 million more if, you know, he makes one of the All-NBA teams. So it kind of goes back to that one game he played in the midst of his injury. You know, it was really interesting because he played like 30 some minutes, and it was Siakam's first game as well. And then like he sat out the next 4 games, and then he comes back on a minutes restriction. But they said there was no setback when he played in that one. Like it's kind of an odd like ebb and flow, but I mean, I think it truly does come back to, you know, him trying to make sure he gets in that threshold of games. I think he can now miss like 2 or 3 more games, and then the All-Pro stuff is out the window because it's what, 65 game minimum.
65 game minimum, and I would highly recommend. We're going to try and get him on at some point this spring. Scott Agnes has a great Substack, the Fieldhouse Files. He is all over this. And so I would highly recommend, you know, subscribing to Agnes. Is totally no advertising here. Just a fan who thinks he has great stuff. He's been all over this, and he has reported that the NBA is going to allow the 2 in-season tournament games in Vegas, which are not regular. They're kind of just games that don't exist in the season. They will count toward that 65, which makes total sense because it's like, hey, Hailburton, you did a great job in this tournament. We're gonna try and sell for $1 billion. Like we can at least give you. Can't count them as real games. So I think that gave him 2 more, which I believe puts him at like 4. I don't have the exact number in front of me. And then for those who don't know what we're talking about, you know, I think it was the latest collective bargaining agreement probably a year or 2 ago. The NBA and the players agreed that, you know, you need to play 65 of the regular season games to be eligible for any postseason awards, which are, you know, All-Pro, MVP, all that. Where it then comes into play is that if you are on a max contract, which Hailburton is on now, and something like Jaylen Brown has had also, if you're on a max contract, it's based on a percentage of the team's overall caps. Like Hailburton right now gets 25% of the team's cap space as part of that max deal, so it scales. If you make all NBA, you then make 30% of the cap. So basically Hailburton's in this spot where he's probably going to make all NBA if he keeps up this production level. So so that becomes a 5% difference in his salary, which I think equates to like $40 million. So it's a big deal. Now, again, I haven't read the full CBA. I'm pretty sure if he makes all NBA next year, it still would kick in, but he loses, he loses that, it automatically gets kicked in once he makes it now. So that's kind of that's kind of setting the stage for what's at play here.
Yeah, and I've seen some folks on Twitter that are like, that's not right. That's screwing players over. I'm like, this was part of, like, it's called collective bargaining. This is the players union and the owners come together to figure these things out and, put a pen on paper and sign it all. Like, it's not just the owners trying to screw people over out of money or anything like that. Like, this was collectively bargained. So it stinks. Like, if you're right on that fringe of making it or not, like, technically Joel Embiid is not going to be one of the top 15 players this season.
Right.
When you look at just all pro, because he's not going to make all pro, he's going to sit out too many games. Like, yeah, that's kind of wild in the grand scheme of things. Like, if you look back on the season, you won't see Joel Embiid on one of those teams, even though he'll probably play 50 plus games and, put up MVP type numbers. Won't make an all pro team. So that part of it will be weird. And it's hard to find that balance and maybe in the next CBA, they lower that threshold or something like that. But, it is something that, both sides agreed to. So it's not like something you can just like get pissed off at the owners for being greedy or something like that.
Well, no, I agree. And you and I are both NBA fans. Like the guys sitting for no reason was getting pretty absurd there for a while. And you still see it in some areas. And there's some guys like, Kawhi, I'm not sure he cares. Like, he's already hit NBA. He's already made enough of the money. And for some guys, it's not a money thing. Is they'd rather just sit. But it's like, it was getting, it kind of sucks when, like, myself, season ticket holder, like, the schedule comes out. And this year, I know it's like I wanted to see Victor Wembanyama, like a lot of people do. I see the schedule. I see that it's a back-to-back for the Spurs. And then the Spurs are like the all-time sick guys team. And I'm like, well, damn it. Like, we're not going to see Victor. Now, they played him, which is like the Spurs were doing things completely bizarre where they were just tanking and playing guys a lot. It's very odd. But like, the Spurs used to be the kings of the scheduled sitting games. So I think part of this is the players, I don't say fault, but like they kind of created a situation where it became a real problem. But also I was talking to a buddy at the bus stop this morning that it's like, 65, at some point you do need to have a threshold, because even if you take that part out, like take the sitting part out, which is a real issue, there were discussions when you and I were growing up of guys who played, 30, 40 games in a season based on just a straight injury, like had a knee injury. And it's like, well, are they eligible for MVP? Are they eligible for all NBA? And it's like, you didn't really have a number, and it sucks you have to pick a number. But at some point, it's like Ja Morant is still one of the best, one of the best guards in the West. I wouldn't say like, oh, he's an all NBA player, because he's out for the rest of the season. And it's like, that sucks. But like part of what made Malone and Stockton so freaking good is they played every single game. And like, availability is the best ability is availability. And so I do think that there is a real logic to kind of saying we have to have a point where you just need to be healthy to play, because you can't be all NBA if you're only playing like 20% of games just based on injury.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to lie, when you first said you were talking to your buddy at the bus stop, I'm racking my brain like, what the hell's Scott taking the bus for?
Kids bus stop. Yes.
I now understand you're talking about your child's bus stop.
Yeah, but we need more sponsors on the Right Up Meridian podcast. Like, anybody who wants a sponsor, let's go. Like, I could love to.
I was talking to my buddy at the bus stop.
Yeah.
We were catching the red line.
Yeah, just going downtown. The only people who ride the red line in Indy, me and my buddy.
I was, but in all seriousness, when you talk about like the game you and I went to, Jason Tatum sat, like, when that's happening, every time somebody buys tickets, like my nephew last year, they were huge Ja fans. Ja goes out, he does his whole warm up, and then it comes out that he's sitting. My nephew was literally crying, like he was so upset that he wasn't playing, and so the NBA had to do something about that because, especially you and I have talked about this off air of like how this era of kids growing up, like some of them don't even have like a favorite team, they just have favorite players because of the 2K stuff,
Right.
and how they consume media, like they're just scrolling TikTok or whatever and just seeing highlights of the top guys. So like even now more than ever, as you're trying to build a new generation of fans and guys and kids are wanting to go see their favorite players on the road and those guys aren't playing, like that was a problem, like you said. And so, they're trying to do something to fix that. They're fining teams if they, certain restrictions, like if you sit on back-to-backs, you're supposed to do it at the home game and not the away game, stuff like that. Trying to make it more appealing for, these road teams and guys and fans that are going to see, top-tiered stars on the road. So, like you said, had to do something about it. It stinks that there's like a hard and fast number, for a guy like Hailburton right now, who's really, he's fighting with what that number is and versus an injury, but it just is what it is. And like you said, still eligible if it can kick in if he does it next year. But hopefully, for Pacers fans' sake, stays healthy the rest of the year. This minutes restriction, they kind of ramp him up, and it's much to do about nothing.
Well, it's also just it's finally. So I'm reading right now. He can miss 4 more games out of the 34 games left. And this was written by Scott Agnes on January 31st. So, yes, that's including the game that he played against the Celtics. So he can miss 4 more. It's just a bummer for a guy like Hailburton because he's also a guy who was really who didn't sit a lot, didn't have a lot of those scheduled sits. Most of the time he's been out, he's been sick. So, and same thing with Siakam. So it's like the nice thing with this Pacers team is you're probably pretty much going to see the team that you want to see every time you go out and see them, which I think is going to be important because this is a team that is, they're fighting for a real playoff spot. Lost to the Celtics, but as it stands right now, they're 27-21. They're starting to lose a little bit of touch with like the Knicks, Cavs, and 76ers. They haven't. They're starting to put some distance between like the Bulls and the Hawks, who are the 9 and the 10 seeds. So you have this group of basically the Pacers, the Heat, and the Magic that are all there, and it's like the 3 of them are fighting for one guaranteed spot. The other 2 will be in the top tier of the play-in. So I think it's important that that Hailburton is going to be playing the rest of the games. Before we finish on the Hailburton point, the conventional wisdom is he just wanted to play in Siakam's first game back. Why do you think he did play in that game against Portland? Because and it sounds like he played, and then it felt like he kind of re-aggravated something, and that's what happened. But it does seem odd that in the middle of that was even before when he had the injury. It's like we're going to reevaluate him in 2 weeks, which had been the end of a West Coast trip. It felt like that was a perfect time to reevaluate. He played before that, and then also as you mentioned, no minutes restriction, just like 38.5 minutes. There's a lot of things there that just don't fully add up. Obviously you and I don't know, like you haven't talked to Tyrese Hailburton this morning, but like outside of just he wanted to play with Siakam and the team's like, okay, like it seems very kind of cavalier. They just let that happen.
Yeah. And, it sounds like his rehab was going well. And so, without knowing too much about I do have a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology. So, what can I say? I know about the human body. But no, like, hamstrings are a weird one to deal with, and so until you really get out there and you like fully ramped up, you're in a game, it's really hard to kind of test that. Like you can go practice and you can do drills and stuff, but they're on the West Coast road trip, so they're not really having like hardcore practice. They're just having shoot arounds and stuff. So like I'm sure they put him through workouts and stuff, and he felt good. But until you're just grinding away at that thing for so many minutes, it's like it's hard to really know if you're ready to go. And then, like you said, kind of looked like he re-aggravated it. So I think like that was a lesson learned. It's like, okay, he says he feels good. He looks good in drills and shoot around and all that. But like, let's be careful about this thing. So I think that's why the minutes restriction is now kicked in. It's like, all right, we played him way too much, coming right back, re-aggravated. Let's make sure we don't do that. So it was kind of a bizarre situation, but also kind of a lesson learned of like, all right, we need to slow roll this thing to make sure that we've got our star player down the stretch here. And, it's not something that continues to linger because that's the last thing you want.
Yeah. So as we look ahead, we're taping this on Thursday morning, February 1st. They got a back-to-back coming up. They're playing at the Knicks. The Knicks are without Julius Randle. They're home to the Kings on Friday night. And then just rattling off the rest of the schedule. They're at Charlotte, home to Houston, home to the Warriors, which the Warriors are not the Warriors that you know anymore. That's not a great team. And then they're at the Knicks again, and then at the Hornets, and then at the Raptors, and then we have the All-Star break. This does feel like a period of time here where you can make some hay. As you look at it, like the Knicks are going to be without Julius Randle. It's sucks for the Knicks, but it's great timing. This might be able to way to pick up some games against the Knicks. The Rockets, the Warriors, the Hornets twice, the Raptors. None of those are good teams. Like this is a spot where theoretically you could win. I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, you could go 6-2, 7-1 in that stretch and really, really start to solidify yourself as, a real contender for that 5-6 seed.
Yeah, that's exciting to me. Like this is a big stretch. I going into January, this was pre Hailburton injury. I was like, man, they're like this is kind of murderer's row of the NBA that you got to go through. And they came out of that. I don't want to say unscathed because obviously, they lost some games and Hailburton got injured, but it could have been a lot worse, especially when you factor in the Hailburton injury. So the fact that they're like you said, there's now some distance between them and the 3-4. But the fact that they came out of that, like still with a fighter's chance to get, one of those top 4 or 5 seeds, Sixers are going to be without Embiid for a little bit too. They could pass them up. Like there's a lot of factors at play here, but with the schedule softening up how it is, it's like you said, it's kind of perfect timing. And then there's going to be the All-Star break. There's going to be a lot of momentum building for just Indiana and Indianapolis in general. So if you can get to, hey, the Pacers are contending for the 4 and a 5 seed by All-Star break, and you're coming off a pretty big, not necessarily win streak, but you're playing good basketball and you've won 6 out of 8 or something like that, and the city's hosting the All-Star game like that, just builds a lot of momentum to the back half of the season for the fan base, for the team in general, from a national perspective. Indy's going to be under the spotlight, and Tyrese Halliburton's going to be a starter.
Yeah.
They just made the Siakam trade. There'll actually be some headlines about the Pacers and what they're doing, and they made the finals of the not the play-in tournament, the in-season tournament. So it's a great time to build momentum. The worst thing that could happen is, like you said, a re-aggravation of the injury. You lose some of these stinkers, and you kind of lose some of that momentum that's being built for something really positive. So I'm excited about this stretch coming up. Like I said, basically for the fact that the schedule's softening up, guys are getting healthy. You can finally get Siakam and Hailburton together, and then they're going to have some practice time together too, which kind of proved to be pretty crucial for Siakam when he finally was able to get some practice time in after that West Coast road trip.
Yeah, it is weird looking at this schedule. After the All-Star break, they play 4 games at home: the Pistons, the Mavs, the Raptors, the Pelicans, and then starting March 1st, this is always one of those things with the NBA that it always kind of catches me off guard, even though I know it's coming. It's like the All-Star break ends, and it's like, oh, we only got 20 games left. It's like the All-Star game is just not the halfway point of the season. It kind of feels that way, but then you look up, because the All-Star game will happen, which I love, and then it's like you do kind of get roped into college basketball. It's like you and I are both fans of college basketball. There'll be the lead up to the conference tournaments that week, and then the conference tournament week, and obviously the NCAA tournament, and then you look up and it's like, oh man, we have 10 games left in the NBA. It's almost done. But March 1st to the end of the season, there are 22 games for the Pacers. 13 of them are on the road. So after this little stretch after the All-Star game, there's a ton of road games. Now, some of them are against, the Pistons and the Warriors, and the Bulls and the Nets. So it's not great. It's not like the competition is awful, but you have a lot of road games there. So just something to note that this little stretch here between now and the All-Star game really is maybe the softest part of the schedule when you look at teams and home games coming up, and that idea of trying to make some hay. And, they've kind of lost touch a little bit with the Knicks, Cavs, and 76ers. But, if they play in 2 games against the Knicks without Randall, if they can get both of those, you're bringing that to a 2-game. You're taking a 4-game, lead down to a 2-game lead for the Knicks.
Yeah, and just looking at the schedule of what those away games are, once you get into March, at least I guess it's, a little bit on the lighter side. You've got Pelicans, Spurs, Mavs. You've got the Magic who are playing a little bit worse at this point. The Thunder are going to be really tough. You did the Pistons, the Warriors, the Lakers. So like at least some of those road games don't look like, it's just like a complete murderer's row of a West Coast road trip. It's always funny when they go on the road. I always like to see like what's forcing that road trip, or what's able to come in. Like this last one was Disney on Ice for like 10 days at Gamebridge. So I wonder what I think it's actually the NCAA tournament is going to be in town. So I'm sure. Well, they don't play that at Gamebridge, do they? They play that at Lucas Oil.
I can't
remember.
No, I think because
I
think it's first 2 rounds. I think it is at Gamebridge because I've seen ads at the games for it. Yeah, so it's a tough for that. It's a tough year because you always have a Disney on Ice thing that comes in, but it's like you notice the Pacers are taking a road trip before the All-Star game. It's like they got to get Gamebridge ready for the All-Star game, so they have a stuck road trip for that, and then the NCAA tournament they're gonna have a road trip for that.
Yeah, it's it'll be fun. I like you said, man, it's just like NCAA tournament, it kind of encapsulates you, and then it's after that, there's what 7 games left after the NCAA championship, and then it's you're in the mid-April and playoff basketball. So the All-Star game, it kind of like feels like a reset for mid-season, but it's well beyond that.
What just a couple of thoughts on some players I want to run by you. What has been your view of Siakam and again, it's a little bit tough. People have been asking me, what do you think of Siakam? It's like, well, he played, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games without Hailburton. So it's like, that's not the Siakam we're going to see. Still put up pretty good numbers. We saw a little bit of him and Siakam together, although then he ended up playing most of his minutes without Hailburton at the end. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts of the Siakam on the Pacers thus far?
He's been fun. I mean, it's been fun to see another person that can create. What I go back to is Hailburton being such a dynamic guard. He's going to get doubled, especially when they're in playoff time and teams are trying to stop him. And now they have somebody else they can throw to that can facilitate offense, and likely would be in 4-on-3 scenarios if they're doubling Hailburton. Deadly in that kind of back down mid-range game. And apparently when you play for the Pacers, you just instantly become a better shooter. He was shooting 31% this year with the Raptors from 3 as a Pacer. He's 43%. So, instantly a better shooter, but that does make sense because of the Pacers spacing, their pace, shooting a lot of shots in flow. Like, it's a good fit. It's a good fit between he and Miles Turner. And, I think Hailburton's just going to unlock him even more. Like he's really kind of had to be back to where he was with the Raptors as like the focal point of the offense. And when he's not having to create everything himself, I think that also makes him better on the defensive end. And when he's not having to be the primary focal point, everything running through him every single possession. And, he's got that length and athleticism that can guard a lot of different positions. I think that also comes in handy come playoff time as well.
2 other guys, and Mathurin also didn't play against the Celtics too, which I think was not really mentioned much in the telecast, but I think was also a factor where you're basically, your star player is on a minutes restriction and one of your better backups is not playing, just FYI. 2 other guys I want to hit on before we wrap up is just Aaron Nesmith and Ben Sheppard than anybody else you want to hit on. But I just, Nesmith is just continuing to impress me. Like he's just really coming on. He's having a great stretch. You look at his game logs, and he would kind of have these, the game against Utah at home, he had 20. I'm just going off of points, which isn't the best stat, but he had like 24 points in the next 3 games. It's like 6, 8, 6, 0, 17, then inactive. And he was kind of like had these peaks and valleys. But you look at the last, he was inactive for 2 games against, at Denver, at Utah. Since he's come back from that, also at Sacramento, inactive 3 games. Since that point, just again, going off of point totals, but just seeing how, his minutes have been going up, and it's 12.6, then 13, 16, 22, 16, 26 against the Celtics. And the Celtics, he looked like at times our number 1 offensive option and was either popping threes, or, driving to the lane. He's obviously one of the better 3-point shooters this season in the NBA. He's been an absolute revelation to me. And at a contract number at like, $10 million a year, just a steal. And really, this is the kind of guy, it's like you want to almost tell him, like, keep at this level. Don't get too much better before we have to give you a new contract.
Don't get too good.
Because this is the kind of guy, like, this is exactly what you need if you want to make a run in the playoffs, is having a dude like this at this contract number.
100%. I mean, against the Celtics, he kind of flirted with a triple double.
Yeah.
I mean, he had 26, 12, and 7. Like, I mean, he certainly gets ramped up for those Celtics games because, they kind of gave up on him, if you will. And, and then the national perspective was that the Celtics got Malcolm Brogdon for like a ball of string and a paperclip. Like, that was the meme that,
right.
That was showcased. Like, I think like Bleacher Report or something was like, here's what the Celtics got Malcolm Brogdon for. And it's like, he's certainly showcasing he's worth more than a ball of string and a paperclip. Yeah, man, he's been fun. And he's I don't have it right in front of me. He was the number 1 3-point shooter in the NBA. I don't know if he still is. He had a couple games where he had like a 1 for 7 and 1 for 5 back to back that might have thrown those numbers off a hair. But I mean, he's shooting 46% from the 3-point line. That to me, he's perfect candidate to play alongside Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Hailburton, given that, he's a fantastic spot up shooter, and those dudes are going to get him looks because they're going to get doubled. The ball is going to move well. And, if there's Miles Turner rolling to the basket and you've got Nesmith that's there spotting up and his guy goes to hell. Like, there's just so many options that, like, he's that perfect piece that is a complement to everything else that the Pacers are doing. Not to mention, he's probably their best defender and can guard multiple positions. He's guarded everybody from, he was guarding Giannis at one point against the Bucks. And then he's guarding Jason Tatum. Like, the array of skill sets that he can guard is pretty vast. So, like, you mix that in, he's kind of like your 3-and-D dude, but can do a little bit more than the 3, just shoot the 3 as well. So, like, a tremendous find. You look at the way this Pacers roster's been built and, a lot of trades. We kind of have that tree of, like, where it started with Paul George, and then there's, several different branches out. But, like, you look at, Tyrese Hailburton was acquired via trade. Siakam acquired via trade. Nesmith acquired via trade. Buddy Hield acquired via trade. Like, you got to give credit where it's due to the front office of not only being able to trade for these guys, but kind of zeroing in on guys that, weren't outside of Siakam. Like, that was a big one. But, like, zeroing in on a guy like Nesmith that, like, didn't really get an opportunity. And Hailburton had put up good numbers with the Kings, but wasn't as unlocked as he is now because he's playing alongside Fox. Like, finding these guys that are in bad situations and letting them flourish here, like, that's big time. And that's kind of what's happening right now with Nesmith.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I also think he's one where, a lot of the Siakam talk is like, how is he going to fit in with Hailburton? I do think, Siakam is not a lockdown defender, but is a really good and long defender. And I think this also helps Nesmith a lot too, is that you now have some lineups where, Siakam is a little, it's something the Pacers didn't have, is kind of like, unfortunately the guard defense is not ideal on this team when you have like a Hield, Hailburton backcourt. And then you have, like, Miles Turner is a good block, good at blocks, but not fantastic on defense. And also just is kind of, he's always stuck on the big guy. Nesmith was kind of on his own in an island, like kind of having to guard all of the forwards. And now, you can put Siakam on a Giannis for 2 or 3 plays and he's not going to get torched. And then Nesmith can keep moving over. So I think this is also unlocking some of Nesmith's defense as well. So the other guy I wanted to talk about was Ben Sheppard, who, has just been playing more, averaging in his last, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. I don't have the averaging here, but it's like well over 12 to 13 minutes a game. It is funny because you had a couple games there where Jarace Walker was starting to play, and it's like, and he looked pretty good against, at Sacramento, at Phoenix. He got 18, 19 minutes, had a pretty good defensive rating, pretty good shooting from 3, like not bad. And then just there's like, oh yeah, it's almost like Carlisle's like, oh yeah, I forgot, I don't play rookies. Like, sorry, man, like back off the bench. Sheppard has found a role on this team part of this, I think, is that he became a necessary ball handler when you had Hailburton out, and then McConnell couldn't play for a couple of games. So there was that. But I'm just, the Sheppard's hustle has been really good. His defense has not been awful. His offense, he's hitting a couple of threes here and there. His offensive rating has flirted in the, 150 to 2 one game against when he's home to Denver, he had an offensive rating of 237, which is just bananas. Since then, it's been like 90, 69, 90. Not great against Boston, a 0 offensive rating. But he's also a rookie. But I've been really impressed with watching him play, especially for a late first-round pick. Anyway, just curious your thoughts on Sheppard or Walker or anywhere you want to go with that.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that can eat minutes, for guys that need rest. Like, he's not going to wow you with his athleticism or his shooting ability or anything, but he's just really solid at a lot of different things. And that's why he's finding the court. Like you said, kind of out of necessity with some of the injuries to the guard spot. Yeah, in terms of Jarace Walker, like, I was so pumped to see him playing minutes because he was very productive in the minutes that he gave. He's kind of in one of those situations where it's like, you got too many guys, like, it's hard to find the minutes right now, just based on what they've got. So I thought it was really intriguing when Carlisle played him at the 3, and Carlisle kind of said in his press conference after that, was like, I kind of liked it. I had 3, 4, and 5. Like, that's something the Pacers have lacked, is size on the wings. And now that you get Siakam and then you've got a Jarace Walker you can throw in there to guard, like, that's intriguing, especially for some playoff lineups when you're flirting and you're tinkering with things and changing things game to game based on what the opponent's doing. Like, you now know, like, you've got some different options you can look at if you're really needing to stop certain players or certain actions, stuff like that. But yeah, in terms of Sheppard and Walker, I love both of them. Like, I think both of them are going to be fantastic pieces and longtime NBA players. And credit to them, like, they go play in the G League. They kind of bounce back and forth between the G League and the NBA. But then when they come in to the NBA, they're productive. Like, it's not one of those things where they come in and, like, they have to, get their minutes in before they get in a flow, and then, they're unproductive. Like, when they're playing, they're productive. And that's hard to do as a rookie. Like, to me, it's one of the hardest things to do is, like, stay ready when you're not playing for long stretches of periods. And to me, it's also a testament to, like, why the G League is so valuable, because those guys are able to go down, get minutes, and continue playing basketball rather than just kind of rotting at the end of a bench. They're not practicing, very often in the NBA. So the G League is definitely a way for them to develop. So I really like both picks. I think both will be productive players for the Pacers in the future. I thought Carlisle also had a good soundbite last week talking about Nesmith and kind of how he stayed the course, didn't get minutes as a rookie, second-year player, struggled, and then has turned into, like, a very valuable piece. And he kind of said, like, he's a testament to, Sheppard and Walker, and he even mentioned Mathurin, of, like, you're not always going to get the minutes that you necessarily want or think you deserve, but when you get them, make the most out of them, and your role is going to continue to flourish. So I thought that was an interesting soundbite. I also thought it was interesting he mentioned Mathurin, like, alongside those two guys. Like, sometimes it's easy to forget. Like, he's still in his second year and still learning how all of this works, because it truly is a business. Like, it's not just going out there and rolling the balls out and playing. Like, it's a business. And so just some interesting sound bites about kind of the younger guys from Carlisle.
No, your point about Walker is very well taken. The last couple games he didn't play 4. He didn't play and then inactive. It didn't play in 2, inactive in 2, and then at Utah he came in, played 26 minutes, offensive rating of 94, defensive rating of 120, so not bad. At Sacramento, played the next game, 19 minutes played, offensive rating of 100, defensive rating 126. Didn't play against Portland, then played against Phoenix, and then had an offensive rating of 144, defensive rating of 115, and then hasn't played for the last 5 games. I think, to your point, it shows he's popping in these games against teams like Utah and Phoenix and Sacramento are not bad teams. Like, those are good teams with good players. Phoenix, you have some possible Hall of Famers on that team and top and all NBA guys. He's coming in and he looks like he's able to play, and I think as you said, it's really tough to, don't play 4 and then come in and play. And even in his case, playing, 15, 20, 30, 20 minutes is a lot. And being able to equip himself well. I'm with you. He's kind of in a tough spot for Walker just because he's not handling the ball. And there's kind of a gluttonous position, but I this is where I wouldn't mind seeing him get a little more playing time here and there and just trying to find ways to squeeze 4 to 5 minutes out of him, maybe in the second quarter, in the third quarter. See if you get him, because I've been impressed with what I've seen out of him. And then in the G League, he's like just dominant. Like in the G League, he's phenomenal. And
Man
it's like,
among
all right,
boys.
yeah, no, for real. So that would be my only criticism to Carlisle, is like, I think this guy could be a real useful piece. But as you said, I'm just not sure with, Nesmith, the way he's playing, with having Matherin in there, with having Jalen Smith, and then Siakam and Turner, both, Turner and Smith are a little bit on the larger side, but it's like there's just a lot of dudes in that spot. And then with the guards, it's like you obviously have Hailburton, you have Nembhard, you have McConnell, and then so it's like and then you have Sheppard who's showing up. Like there's a glut. It's a good place to be, but I do think getting him continued development would be good.
Absolutely. And when they traded Siakam, or for Siakam,
Right.
It's pretty apparent what the front office thinks about most of these young guys, because almost all of them were off the table. Like, they traded
Yeah, no, you're right.
Nora and first round pick. Like the front office and Carlisle, kind of an extension of that, think highly of these young guys, to where like they're like, we're not giving any of this up for Pascal Siakam. Like, we want to keep this intact. So it kind of speaks to that too, of like, they see a future for them and they think they're going to be very productive players. It's just like right now there's a log jam and that they got to figure some things out.
I would also, last thing I'll say is I do not have it up here, but I saw a soundbite. It was either in the Indy Star or on Scott Agnes's Substack, the Fieldhouse Files, about another quote of Siakam, basically saying like, I think it was after Siakam's first game in Indy, just, talking about the fans, but like, I'm really excited to make a home here. Like again, nothing has been finalized yet, but there's a lot of smoke signals coming out. And again, Kyrie Irving did this with Boston. Like, I can't wait to stay here, and then immediately cut bait and left. Kyrie Irving is also a very unique case in a lot of his own ways. It does feel like very much that Siakam is going to re-sign with the Pacers, like, which I think is great. I think I'd love to see this play out after an entire offseason, after a full, training camp, and really see what Hailburton and Siakam could put together. Because I think that's the other thing too, is no matter how this season ends, there's just not a lot of practice time these guys are going to have to put stuff together. And so this is all going to be kind of done on the fly. I think you're going to unlock, and I think Hailburton is the kind of player who can unlock stuff for Siakam when they really start getting in the lab and looking at stuff. But that's not going to happen until next season. But anyway, all the smoke signals, all the things that are being said, it does really feel like Siakam is going to re-sign with the Pacers.
100%. Yeah. And like, kind of the new age version of some of those smoke signals, like, hit what he posts on Instagram and stuff like that I pay attention to. Like, it's been all love, and, posting like the banners of the retired numbers and stuff, like with him standing underneath it, like all of that stuff. Like, and then he posted a picture. It was him, Nembhard, and they share the same agent. Just little tea leaves here and there. And then his agent obviously coming out with that statement as soon as the trade happened, basically saying he looks forward to a bright future in Indiana. I think that I would be shocked if he didn't stay around. And fortunately, he is not Kyrie Irving. In that, that kind of a little bit of a loose cannon there is Kyrie Irving. So, excited that Siakam is not him in this regard.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up there. We have a trade deadline coming up, not a free agent deadline, as Tony let me know. Yes, the trade deadline coming up. As we look at the calendar, that's next week, right? I don't know why they do it Super Bowl week. It's like NBA could own the week after that. I don't know why they do that. It'd be great leading up into the All-Star game, but anyway, it's next week. So during all the Super Bowl talk, there will be, I think it's a week from today, there'll be a trade deadline. So let's plan on maybe coming on right before or maybe right after that. Maybe see what the Pacers end up doing. I guess I will end on this. Do you see the Pacers doing anything at the trade deadline?
I don't. Given on like how unwilling they were to part with any young pieces, I'd be surprised. I think Obi Toppin and Buddy Hield are kind of the two you could see perhaps being moved for the right price, just given that they're on expiring deals anyway, and probably not part of the future of this franchise. But like both fit kind of nicely with where they're at currently. And you factor in that Hield is Tyrese Halliburton's best friend. Um, it's it's not like you're like letting go of pieces to a contender that might need a shooter or might need an athletic guy. Like you're kind of that team now. So it's like, to me, I don't really see a deal that would make sense for the Pacers to move off of those two, but you never know. Pritchard, I'm sure has his eyes on some things that if the right thing came up, he'd pull the trigger.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it. You're right. Those are the only two guys. Toppin's on a great deal. He's making $6.8 million this year. If you can, he's a restricted free agent. I'm not sure what the restrictions are on his deal, so he's not completely unrestricted like Buddy Hield. But if you're Obi Toppin seems really happy here. As best we can tell, we're not talking to these guys, but like watching him on the court,
we haven't FaceTimed in a couple days.
Yeah. Watching him like pregame and stuff, he looks like he's really happy. He seems happy with his minutes. He is playing well with Hailburton. Like if I'm Obi, and I don't see what he's done this year. If any team in free agent giving him $13 million a year, I think he might. I'm with you. I don't think the Pacers make a move, and as much talk as we had about Buddy Hield early on, and as kind of nervous I was getting of letting an asset like that go. I think once they did the Siakam deal, it's like, all right, you can almost risk losing an asset. You don't need to always trade everything, because what you are getting is you're getting Hield for the rest of this season, no matter what, in a season where you might be, the 6 seed or the 5 seed in the playoffs. And if you're the 5 seed, it's like you got a shot at winning a first round playoff series. And that might be worth more than whatever dumpy second round pick you get back for him. Not that Hield's bad, but it's like, Hield's not going to get you an amazing cache of stuff back. I think Pritchard will obviously kick tires, but and there's a world too where maybe you look at Hield. It's like, look, are you willing to stay here for $13 million a year for 2 years or something, and maybe you can keep both of those guys. But I'm with you. I think the Pacers already made their move, and I don't see them making another move. And I think the last thing is, we were going to do a big deep dive on where could you put Hield, but like the little bit that I was kicking around is like the teams that can use Buddy Hield, there's just not a lot of stuff they can give you back.
Right.
I mean, the other one too.
Best case scenario, you get a late first round pick, and it's like, do you really need that? In the next couple of years, you don't. Like your roster is somewhat set in terms of young production. So it's like, that's why they were willing to come off a first round pick next year, or two of them, because it's like your roster is somewhat front loaded with young talent.
Yeah, I mean the only other one that you could look at maybe moving is like TJ McConnell, because I think he has a lot of value for a lot of other teams, but I think, like you said, man, it's like part of it is like, but we're also like the Pacers are one of those teams where he can use his value, and it's like he's making 8.7, he's extension eligible next year for 9.3, so you basically get to keep him at the same amount, and he's fantastic insurance, injury insurance, and also like he's a guy who leads that second unit sometimes better than Nembhard. Like that's a whole different discussion, but he pushes the ball sometimes faster than Nembhard, and in an odd way keeps the offense running more like Hailburton than Nembhard can at times.
And just an energy, dude. Like, when we were at that game against the Celtics, like, Hailburton went down and he just kind of like led the charge there. And he's hilarious. Like watching him off the ball, like you don't really get to see a lot of it on camera, but like in person, like, that one of the guy, I can't remember exactly what happened. Like somebody on the other, or it was the referee, like did the punch for they called a charge on McConnell. And he just looks at the referee and mocks him. like little stuff like that. Like he's funny. Like I like him being around just based on that.
I completely agree. All right, we're gonna let you go on that. It has been we went a little longer than we thought for having not lots to talk about. There's always something to talk about. So Tony, it's great. Yeah, let's have you back. Let's do it next week right after the trade deadline.
Perfect. Always a pleasure chatting some Pacers hoops.
Love it, man. All right, for Tony, this is Scott on the Right Up Meridian podcast. As always, thank you guys for listening and signing off.